Good morning, everyone. Today, our group will be presenting Chapter 10 of Advanced Corporate Finance. So, as the first presenter, I will begin by introducing our topic, the foundations of international corporate finance. And later, you will also hear insightful discussions from my group mates, Ma'am Michelle Arguel, Sir Jason Lolo, Ma'am Janice Nadira, and Ma'am Nisrin Yusuf. Together, we will walk you through the different concepts and applications of international corporate finance and its importance in today's global business environment. International corporate finance is the study of how companies manage financial decisions when operating across borders. Unlike domestic finance, it deals with additional complexities such as foreign exchange risk, political uncertainties, tax variations, and diverse financial markets. Its scope includes managing working capital globally, analyzing cross-borders investment, optimizing capital structures, raising funds in international markets, and mitigating risk through strategies like hedging. So it is the principles with the realities of globalizations, making it essential for businesses to remain competitive and financially resilient in a rapidly changing world. Our presentation will cover the foundations of international corporate finance, where we will explore how traditional financial principles are applied in a global setting. We will discuss key concepts, the dynamics of global markets, and the evolving role of international finance in today's interconnected economy. This will be the set stage for understanding how companies navigate risks and opportunities when they operate across borders. From there, we will go deeper into specific areas, foreign exchange risk management, where we will look at the types of exposures, measurement techniques, and hedging strategies. International capital budgeting, which examines how firms adjust investment evaluations for a country risk, repatriations issues, and taxation differences and cross-border mergers and acquisitions, where we will highlight strategic considerations, valuation challenges, and post-merger integration. Finally, we will end with a strategic integration showing how companies can better manage risk and align strategies in global mergers and projects. In essence, traditional financial management is extended into a worldwide setting through international corporate finance. It centers on the financial choices that companies make while conducting business internationally, where they must contend with issues including tax fluctuations, exchange rates, varied tax regimes, and political concerns. It covers the topic including risk reductions, cross-border working capital management, assessing foreign investments, and capital structures, optimizing to fit international markets, going beyond the fundamental of finance. In summary, it guarantees that businesses maintain their competitiveness and financial stability in a globalized world. Unlike domestic finance, international corporate finance must deal with far more complexity. Companies face variability in exchange rates, differences in taxations and regulations, and even political risks such as capital controls or expropriations. Financial managers also encounter challenges like diverse financial reporting standards and equal access to capital markets and the needs of sophisticated global cash management. Because of these factors, international finance requires broader frameworks for risk assessment and management, where decision makers must balance growth opportunities with exposure to global risk. Several crucial elements must be taken into consideration in order to manage international corporate finance successfully. To successfully navigate a variety of markets, businesses need to develop cross-cultural competencies and a solid grasp of global financial concepts. Real-time tracking of risk, performance, and compliance requires the establishment of strong cross-border financial monitoring systems. In order to obtain funding access global capital markets and maximize their investment choices, companies also require flexible and approaches to react to shifting local market conditions and build solid connections with international financial institutions. The global corporate finance landscape is also changing due to emerging developments. So both opportunities and problems are being presented to multinational organizations by advancements like digital currencies, fintech technologies, and in increased emphasis on environment, social and governance or ESG factors. Businesses must adapt new technologies, reconsider long-standing procedures, and include sustainability into financial judgments in order to stay resilient and compatibility in a world that is changing quickly. Currency risk, being aware of the various forms, effects, and methods of currency risk uh, mitigation. Currency value swings can affect a company's earnings, expenses, and overall financial situation, which is known as foreign exchange risk. Businesses should be aware of the virus, various various forms of vulnerability. Sorry for that, including economic translations and transactional exposures, and how this can impact their operations. So businesses can protect their financial performance in global markets and lessen the impact of currency fluctuates by employing techniques like futures, options, and swaps. Currency risk, also known as foreign exchange risk or FX risk, is the possibility of suffering a financial loss as a result of exchange rate movements. It mostly impacts businesses and investors who trade or invest internationally, since fluctuation in exchange rates can drastically impact transaction cost, asset values, and overall profitability. So maintaining steady financial performance in a global economy requires effective risk management. Foreign currency risk can be categorized into three main types, with economic risk being one of the most significant, and also called the forecast or operating exposure risk. Economic risk arises from unexpected currency fluctuations that impact a company's overall market value. Unlike transaction risk, which affects individual contracts, or translations risk, which affects financial reporting. Economic risk influences a firm's long-term competitiveness and profitability, making it critical consideration for strategic planning in international finance. Okay, how economic risk manifest? Changes in exchange rates influence a company future cash flows, investment choices, and market valuation, which leads to economic risk. So the rest is caused by several things. So I will give you an example. Consider Toyota, which earns a large share of the revenue from sales in the US. So if the Japanese yen unexpectedly strengthen against the US dollar, American customers will find Toyota cars more expensive compared to local or other brand. Even if Toyota doesn't change its prices, the stronger yen reduces the value of its dollar earnings once converted back to yen. So, lowering profitability, this long-term shift can affect Toyota's competitiveness, investment plans, and even its market valuation. So, demonstrating how economic risk can reshape a company's future. Economic risk affects pricing competitiveness, where when the currency movements change, how products are valued in global markets. A stronger home currency can make export more expensive and reduce sales abroad, while a weaker currency can boost export demands but raise the cost of imported materials. Exchange rate fluctuations make it difficult to accurately assess the profitability of overseas investment. If the foreign currency weakens, the value of return translated back into the home currency may decrease, reducing the overall gains from the investment. So businesses with long-term contracts in foreign currencies face the risk that exchange rate movements will alter the actual value of payments over time. A major shift in currency rates can turn an otherwise profitable contract into a loss or reduce the expected return. So I will give you another example of the construction company here in Kuwait. So if they sign a 5-year contract to build a housing units, wait, a housing units, mm, with payments agreed in UAE dirham. So this, the money in Dubai is called dirham. So if the dirham weakens significantly against the Kuwaiti dinar, yung dinar is ito yung pera namin dito. Okay, during the contract period, the company will receive less value when converting the payments back to dinars, reducing the project's profitability. How economic risk manifests. So supply chain disruptions happen when changes in currency values make imported materials more expensive, which increases production cost. So investors consider a company exposure to currency risk when assessing its share value. Companies with a high foreign exchange exposure often experience bigger swings in market value compared to businesses that only operate locally. The example here I use is consider the OFW in Kuwait who sends money regularly to their family in the Philippines. So, i-consider ko yung sarili ko dito na example as illustrative example. Okay, so ako na isang OFW in Kuwait, nagpapadala ng pera sa aking family sa Pilipinas. So, ang Pilipinas ay nakakaranas ng economic risk. So, kapag bumaba ang halaga ng peso kumpara sa Kuwaiti dinar, na ito ay nagpapababa ng aktual na kita ng pamilya ko. So, kahit na pareho pa rin ang halaga ng padala ko sa dinar, bumababa ang kapangyarihan nitong pera sa Pilipinas. So, naaapektuhan yung daily needs, basic needs ng pamilya ko. Hindi lang yun, pati education, lahat na. Basta connected siya sa expenses ng dyan sa Pilipinas. Uh, Foreign exchange rate risk can be reduced using strategies. Risk can be strategies like hedging and netting. So hedging looks in exchange rate to for future transaction with tools such as forwards, future options, or swaps, which lowers uncertainty but may limit potential gains if rates move favorably. So netting involves offsetting payments and is receipt in the same foreign currency, reducing the total amount of currency conversion if needed and minimizing exposure to exchange rate fluctuations. Mitigating foreign exchange risk. So we have here matching. This ensures that the funding currency and the associated cash flows are in the same currency. A business investing abroad, for example, might take out a loan in the local currency to lessen its exposures to changes in the exchange rate. The invoicing naman is to transfer the exchange rate risk to the clients. Businesses may attempt to issue invoices in their native currency, but this could make things less competitive. Operational strategies include sourcing and production diversification, pricing strategy adjustments, and investment site selection. So, kailangan maingat tayo dito sa pagpili ng lokasyon para sa business natin. So, there are three main categories of foreign exchange risk. Uh, we have here the transaction risk occurs when first is the transaction risk occurs when exchange rates change between the start and settlement of a transaction. For example, if a company agrees to buy products in a foreign currency and that currency strengthens, the company will have to pay more in the local currency than originally expected. So ang transaction risk ay ang panganib na may panganib na tumaas ang halaga ng palitan sa pagitan ng start ng pagsisimula at hanggang yung sa pagbabayad ng isang transaction na maaaring magpataas ng gastos para sa kumpanya. The transaction risk naman arises when rates change between agreeing on a deal and making the payment. So in this example, Kuwait Airways, if meron tayong Philippine Airlines at Cebu Pacific in the Philippines, meron din tayo ditong Kuwait Airways. So ang example dito is yung Kuwait Airways signs a contract to purchase aircraft parts from a European supplier with a payment due in euro after 6 months. So at the time of the agreement, 1 KD equals to 3 euros. However, by the time the payment is due, the euro strengthens and now 1 KD is equally only to 2.85 euros. So these fluctuations forces Kuwait Airways to spend more dinars than initially expected, raising the actual cost of the aircraft parts. So ang transaction risk ay nangyayari kapag nagbabago ang halaga ng palitan mula sa oras ng kasunduan hanggang sa kabayaran. There are three main categories foreign exchange rate examples. So ito ang example ko is about again OFW, yung pera talaga yung exchange rate kasi ito yung pinaka best example sa akin as an OFW. So for example, I remit 500 Kuwaiti dinars monthly to my family in the Philippines. So initially expecting them to receive like 90,000 at an exchange rate of 180 per Kuwaiti dinar, 1 Kuwaiti dinar. However, if the peso appreciates to 170 per Kuwaiti dinar, my family receives only 85,000. So resulting 5,000 loss for due to transaction risk. So conversely, if the peso weakens, the family gains more pesos for the same remittance. So pag 500 tas mataas, mas mataas ang marireceive ng family ko, 'di ba? So the value of the remittances highlighting the inherent uncertainty and vulnerability na yung sa family ko sa Pilipinas. So nagpapakita ito ng financial performance at posisyon ng parent company dahil sa pagbabago ng halaga ng palitan. So we have another example here. Transaction risk occurs when a company converts like financial statement of its foreign subsidiaries into its reporting currency. So kahit na hindi nagbago ang aktual na cash flow, maaaring maapektuhan ang ipinapakitang financial performance at position ng parent company dahil nga sa pagbabago ng halaga ng palitan. So we have here an example, Gulf Holdings sa Kuwait. So here, a Kuwaiti investment company, Gulf Holdings, owns a subsidiary in the Philippines that reports 100 million in annual earnings, so which must be consolidated into a Kuwaiti dinars, an exchange rate of 180 to if 1 KD. So the dinars, the earnings are valued at 500,055 to 556 Kuwaiti dinar. But if the peso weakens to 200 per 1 KD, the same earnings, yung subsidiary na 200 million ay yung pera na 200 peso per 1 KD, magiging half million na lang siya. So, kahit pareho ang tunay na kita ng subsidiary, mas mababa pa rin ang ipinapakitang kita sa financial statements ng parent company na nagpapakita na naman ito ng translations risk. Let's have another example in a Kuwait Finance House or KFH. Let's consider Kuwait Finance House, KFH, which owns a subsidiary in Turkey, operates entirely in Turkish lira or TRY. At the end of 225, the end of 201, the net income subsidiary na mayroong 200 million ay kinonvert natin sa Kuwaiti dinars sa palitan na 1 KD to 100 lira. So ito ay magiging 2 million Kuwaiti. Ngunit kapag humina ang lira sa Kuwait na magiging 120 ang halaga, magiging 1.67 million siya. Ito na lamang ang magiging halaga niya. So ipinapakita nito ang translation risk kung saan bumaba ang ipinakitang kita sa financial statement ng parent company kahit hindi nagbago ang tunay na kita ng subsidiary dahil sa pagbabago ng palitan. Economic risk, also called operating risk, refers to the effect of currency fluctuation on a company's overall market value, future cash flows. So here, this value and cash flows in the future, it takes into account how changes in exchange rates may impact a business ability to compete. Pricing policies and investment choices. For example, a company export may become more costly in overseas market due to the stronger local currency, which would lower sales and earnings. So That's it. I think I finished my sections on my presentation on the fundamentals and dangers of global corporate finance, which covers economic translations and transaction risk. The following sections will be covered by my group mates, Ma'am Michelle, Sir Jason, Ma'am Janice, and Ma'am Nisreen. So, who will go on to elaborate on risk management techniques. So, my main takeaway for my topic is that mm, being aware of foreign exchange risk allows businesses to make smarter decisions and protect their financial performance in the global market. That's all for my topic. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Our new topic is international capital budgeting. International capital budgeting is a critical process for evaluating and managing investment projects across borders. Understanding the unique factors influencing capital budgeting in a global context, which is essential for making sound financial decisions, and it also involves assessing the feasibility and profitability of long-term investments in foreign markets. The international capital budgeting involves assessing the feasibility and profitability of long-term investments in foreign markets. These decisions often include projects like opening new facilities abroad and acquiring foreign businesses or expanding into emerging markets. The capital budgeting process, as discussed by Group 3, capital budgeting is a process business used to analyze, prioritize, and evaluate large-scale projects that require vast amounts of investment. It is used to choose projects that mainly add value to an organization. It involves several steps. First, you need to identify the project. That means determining which investments align with strategic goals. Second, you need to estimate the cash flows on that project. This means projecting inflows and outflows in the local currency. Third, you need to assess risk. That means accounting for exchange rate fluctuations, political instability, and economic volatility. Fourth, you need to determine the discount rate. This means using the appropriate cost of capital adjusted for company-specific risks and country-specific risks. This is one area where it often gets confusing for firms. So make sure that you're careful about what those risks are and that you are using the appropriate discount rate. And then fifth, and finally, we need to make the decision. Evaluate the project's net present value or the NPV, the internal rate of return, the IRR, and the payback period, and make a decision accordingly. Unlike domestic projects, international investments often face additional complexities, including exchange rate risk, where currency fluctuations can affect cash flows and project returns, or taxation and repatriation issues, where differing tax laws and restrictions on repatriating profits can impact the viability of project, or even political risk which relates to changes in government, regulations, and policies. And these can all alter the investment landscape. And of course, we've got to be worried about inflation and economic growth. These are country-specific economic conditions all around the world that influence cost and revenue potential in any project we are considering. For example, when a Philippine-based company like Jollibee here invests in US, the revenues and profits from the Jollibee is typically earned in US dollars. But when those profits are eventually repatriated to the Philippines, they must converted into Philippine pesos. About the discount rate, typically the discount rate is the weighted average cost of capital. Specifically, you'll probably need to make adjustments based on adding a country-specific risk premium to account for political and economic uncertainties, and then factoring in project-specific risks like sector, volatility, or regulatory exposure. And this adjusted rate ensures a more accurate valuation of international projects. There's several key financial metrics that we can use to evaluate the prospective international project, and these start with NPV, or net present value. This measures the difference between the present value of cash inflows and outflows, indicating whether a project adds value over time. NPV is technically the most correct decision criteria for evaluating any capital budgeting project. But the IRR, or internal rate of return, is often more popular because it's more intuitive. IRR is essentially the discount rate at which the NPV equals zero. It reflects a project profitability. Another way to think about it is the profitability rate on that project over time, MIRR, or the modified internal rate of return. Adjust the internal rate of return for reinvestment assumptions, and this provides a more realistic return estimate over time. So MIRR adds a nuance to IRR, which accounts for cash flows that are received by the project along the way. And finally, the roughest kind of back of the envelope calculation, but ones that's still popular because of its simplicity, is the payback period. Payback period simply measures the time required to recover the initial investment, and this is useful for assessing liquidity risk. To manage risk through business can implement a variety of strategies. For example, you can use currency hedging. Currency hedging involves using financial instruments like forwards or options to mitigate exchange rate risks. The firm could also rely on diversification, that is spreading investments across regions to reduce dependency on a single market or project. Third, when it comes to political risk, the firm might turn to political risk insurance to protect against losses to government action or instability. And fourth, we might rely on sensitivity analysis, that is essentially scenario analysis, testing how changes in key variables like exchange rates or inflation impact project outcomes. Overall, international capital budgeting requires careful analysis and risk management. By understanding the factors influencing global investment and using robust evaluation tools, business can make informed decisions that drive growth and profitability. Thank you. These are the references used for this topic. And our next topic will be the international financing and capital structure. For my part, I'll discuss international financing and capital structure, where it looks at how multinational corporations raise funds globally and how they decide on the right mix of debt and equity to support their operations. Essentially, it's about striking a balance between opportunity and risk in the global financial markets. By the end of this section, we should be able to first identify the sources of international financing. Second is to analyze how multinational firms choose their capital structure. Third, understand the global risks that affect the financing decisions. And finally, apply different capital structure theories in a traditional setting. International financing is when firms raise money outside their home country through bonds, equity, or loans. Capital structure, meanwhile, refers to the combination of debt and equity a company uses. For multinational firms, the objective is to minimize their overall cost of capital while effectively managing risks like currency fluctuation, taxes, and political uncertainty. Multinational corporations have access to different sources of funding. They can raise equity through cross-listing and depository receipts. They can borrow in their international debt markets such as Eurobonds or syndicated loans. Multilateral institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, and it also provide funding, especially for infrastructure and development. Finally, alternative financing such as private equity, sovereign wealth funds, and fintech platforms are emerging sources of the global capital. When we talk about capital structure, three key theories often come up. The trade-off theory says firms balance tax advantages of debt against bankruptcy costs. The pecking order theory says firms prefer internal funds first, then debt, and only issue equity as a last resort. The market timing theory suggests companies issue securities when market conditions are favorable. But in the global setting, these theories become more complex because of the different tax regimes, regulations, and investor preferences. Several factors influence a multinational capital structure. Exchange rate volatility can alter debt repayment costs. Tax treaties and rules differ across countries. Political and sovereign risk may discourage heavy borrowing to unstable markets. Global interest rate movements affect financing costs, and finally, investor perceptions and market liquidity play a major role in shaping financial decisions. Debt financing in the global market usually takes the form of Eurobonds, which are bonds issued in currency that is not native to the country of issue. There are also foreign bonds like samurai bonds in Japan or Yankee bonds in the US. Syndicated loans are another option, where a group of banks lends to a corporation together. The advantage is access to a larger investor base and possibly lower interest rates. The downside is exposure to currency risk and the regulatory requirements of multiple jurisdictions. Equity financing options include cross-listing on foreign stock exchanges, issuing depository receipts like ADRs and GDRs, or private placements with global institutional investors. Strategic alliances and joint ventures can also serve as a form of equity financing, especially in countries where foreign ownership is restricted. Equity financing improves a firm visibility and diversifies its investors base, but it can dilute control. Let's look at two examples. Tesla issued Eurobonds in Europe to tap into lower borrowing costs and diversify funding sources. However, this exposed them to exchange rate risk. Closer to home, companies like Ayala Corporation and SM here in the Philippines have issued offshore bonds to access global capital and reduce reliance on the Philippine market. Both cases show the trade-offs were broader investor reach, but added risk from foreign exchange and global market volatility. To wrap up, international financing offers corporations broader opportunities, but it also brings more complexity. An optimal capital structure means finding the right balance between cost of capital, global risk, and financial flexibility. Moving forward, we'll see more innovative instruments like ESG-linked bonds and fintech-driven funding, as well as new challenges like global tax reforms. Ultimately, financial managers need to be both strategic and adaptable in today's international financial environment.
So the next topic is the working capital management across borders. Working capital management is the administration of companies' short-term assets and liabilities to ensure liquidity, efficiency, and profitability. When expanded across borders, it becomes more complex because of different currencies, regulations, cultural practices, tax systems, and political or the economic risks. Key objectives is to maintain optimal liquidity for operations, minimize financing costs, maximize returns on current assets across different countries. The components of cross-border working capital. We have cash and cash equivalents, which is the currency fluctuations and exchange controls affect availability and value. The accounts receivable, which is the longer collection period in some countries. Credit risk increases in unstable economies. Inventory, global supply chains, customs delays, tariffs, and logistical challenges influence holding costs. And lastly, we have the accounts payable, which are the terms vary by country. Suppliers may demand shorter or longer credit terms depending on market norms. Challenges in international WCM. Foreign exchange risk. The currency appreciation or depreciation affects receivables, payables, and cash balances. We have the regulatory and tax differences. Some countries impose restrictions on capital flows, repatriation of earnings, or tax transfer uprising. Banking and financial infrastructures, which is the availability of local financing, interest rates, volatility, and access to credit differ across markets. Fourth is the cultural and business practices, which payment behaviors, credit culture, and supplier relationships vary widely. We have the political and economic risks, which is the inflation, capital control, sanctions, or political instability disrupts working capital cycles. The strategies for managing cross-border WCM. Cash management. We have centralized treasury operations. Example are the global cash pooling. Use hedging tools, forwards, options, swaps to reduce FX exposure. And then we have the invest idle cash in local short-term instruments considering risk return. And then we also have the receivable management, which implements international credit policies tailored to each market. Use export credit agencies, letters of credit, and factoring to reduce default risks. It also monitors day sales outstanding or DSO globally and locally. Third, we have the inventory management, which balance global efficiency with local responsiveness. Use just-in-time (JIT), vendor managed inventory (VMI), or regional warehouses to reduce carrying costs. It's also factors in tariffs, customs delays, and geopolitical risks. Fourth, we do have the payables management, which negotiates favorable terms with global suppliers, take advantage of international trade credit and supplier financing programs, use supply chain financing, the reverse factoring to support suppliers in weaker economies. The best practices in global work capital management. Centralized control with local flexibility. We have technology and ERP systems. Third is the tax-effective structures. Fourth, the risk management integration. Fifth, performance metrics. Working capital management across borders is not just financial control, but also a strategic tool to maintain liquidity, manage risks, and support global competitiveness. Companies must blend financial discipline, risk management, and cultural awareness to succeed in international market. The last topic for Group 10 is the taxation and repatriation strategies. Our goal is not just to define these terms, but to really see how they operate in real life. By the end of the session, we should be able to connect theory with what's happening in the Philippine markets, where multinationals like Shell, Toyota, and BPO firms make big financial decisions based on taxation and repatriation rules. In simple terms, taxation is the government's way of getting its share from business activities. But in international finance, taxation becomes complicated. Companies operating across borders deal with not only their home country's taxes, but also host country rules. This is where issues like double taxation arise when the same income is fixed in two countries unless treaties intervene. Repatriation is simply bringing the money home. When a Filipino-owned company earns profits abroad, or when a multinational in the Philippines send money back to Japan or the US, that's repatriation. It sounds simple, but it's actually loaded with tax, legal, and financial consequences. Countries use different systems. Some only tax local income, like Singapore, making them attractive to investors. Others, like the US, before the Trump tax reforms, tax global income, leading to complex tax avoidance schemes. Many countries now use hybrid systems to remain competitive. Tax is where the real pain points are. Multinationals often face double taxation, strict rules on transfer pricing, and withholding taxes when they move profits across borders. And exchange rate fluctuations and sudden profit margins look very different from what was projected. Companies don't just repatriate through dividends. They use royalties, fees, or even loans to move money in ways that are tax efficient. Some use tax treaties strategically, what's called treaty shopping, to reduce their tax exposure. Of course, these practices are now under scrutiny by regulators worldwide. In the Philippines, we have recently reduced our corporate tax rate through the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, or the CREATE, to attract more investments. However, firms still face withholding taxes on dividends and royalties. Incentives are provided in eco-zones and BOI registered firms, but these are now more targeted under CREATE. In practice, BPO earn billions here in the Philippines, but send most profits back home. Manufacturing firms, especially in Laguna and Cavite, remit profits via dividends or royalties. The challenge, compliance with the Philippine tax rules plus the impact of peso depreciation, sometimes working for them, sometimes against. Globally, we're seeing a push for a 15% minimum corporate tax to prevent tax havens from dominating. Locally, the BIR is enforcing stricter transfer pricing documentation. And with the rise of digital giants, the Philippines is also exploring digital taxation. So even the Netflix or Google pays their fair share. For businesses, the message is clear. Tax planning isn't optional. It's strategic. Firms need to use treaties, document transfer pricing properly, and smart about timing profit repatriation, especially with the peso dollar exchange swinging wide. So in conclusion, taxation and repatriation strategies are not just accounting issues. They're lifelines for both the governments and the corporations. In the Philippines, the balance is delicate. We want to attract investors, but we also need to safeguard our revenue. So the challenge is ongoing, and it's where smart finance strategy meets the public policy. So these are the references for this topic. And that's all for Group 10. And thank you for your time and have a good Sunday.